We're going to be starting a really big project on our motorhome. We realized we've had some water damage. This is the bunk area, the over cab bunk area. And on our last little camping trip, we realized we were getting a lot of drips onto the hood of basically rust colored water. That means all of this has to come out. We have to find if there's any mold in there, how much mold there is, and what we need to replace. The first thing we need to do is start tearing out all of these cabinets so that we can at least get this board up. This little plywood, basically. It's all glued in place, which makes it really hard to get off. But that's what we're going to be doing today, is getting off these cabinets and exposing these boards so we can lift this up and see the extent of the damage. We end up getting that cabinet out. Still got this one on the right in here. Mostly just attached through staples and then screws into basically the sides and the top here though. So definitely not going to go back together because all of this stuff basically just ripped and splintered when it was taken out, so we'll just have to build something new for that. What you see over here on the side, that looks like it might be mold. That's actually just adhesive. That's just glue from the factory, and so I'm not worried about that right now, but we are going to be diving into the front of this to see how much water damage there is. We're also going to be taking off this trim panel here. These are just these screws to pull that off, which will make pulling this up a lot easier. So this is the cabinet, and this is her little loft area, so she's supervising. You can see here, this is just kind of paper. I don't know if this was backing, but this is moist right here. It's wet. But this is the wood, and you can see black mold is at the bottom here. The good thing though, all of this looks really good, and so I'm suspecting that all of this is gonna be okay. So what we need to do next, we're going to continue removing the rest of this in that cabinet and then start pulling this up to see how much wood needs to be replaced. We've got the cabinet over there out now. This cabinet, now we're just working on this piece. So there's really no value in showing how I take apart the cabinets because every trailer is going to be different, but basically you're just going to have a bunch of trim pieces that you need to take off with a crowbar, and then it's going to expose screws, and you take the screws off. We are going to try to save this wood framing because there's no water damage on that, but we can see a lot more black mold here in this corner. A good indication about where your mold's going to be too is your screws here. As I'm going along, there gets to be more and more rust in these areas. These screws over here had just a little bit of rust and only a couple of screws had them, whereas this one, all the screws have been rusty. So our leak likely has been over here, or this has just been the low point, how my trailer's been parked and all the water settled over there. So I'm just tearing out the floors now. See, we've got a lot of black mold in here. I am wearing a respirator because this is really bad to get into your lungs. Basically, you just have to find where the clean wood is, tear at least back to that. I can see some of my framing has come up almost to where the good plywood is, so that's going to have to be replaced, or at very minimum treated and looked at to make sure it's still strong, you can hold screws. So it's a lot of work because it's all glued in. You just gotta take it, sometimes just with the pry bar, and keep pulling back, exposing all the nastiness. But keep on it. We've been tearing out as much as we can, coming back trying to find good wood, and I believe if we bring it back to basically where I put this chalk line here, all the way across, feeling all this wood, this has been really solid, so I believe that this is going to be just fine. But I think everything in front of that I'm going to cut, remove it, replace it. We've got all the styrofoam out now, and this is just kind of residue from the styrofoam and the glue. And we've got this side as well. We still have some layers of the Luan board that'll have to come up, so you can basically get down to just the backing on the pylon. You can see right here, we started getting to the backing. It's just gonna be a lot of scraping to get that off. And you can see just how weak this whole structure is now. And I'm just kind of looking at this. I'm thinking we may have to bring this all the way back to here and decide how we're gonna replace that board. This side looks okay towards the rear, but obviously really bad on the front. Both these boards have to be replaced, as well as basically all this framing, which is just 2x2 framing. We're at a point in the project where we've done about as much as we can do on the inside. So the next piece we're going to be taking off is actually on the outside, this underneath piece, this seam basically that's supposed to connect to this board. But as you can see here, these are the screws. They've pulled out, so it should be pretty easy to get that piece off. So we need to remove that piece, the trim on the outside, and then the trims around here. That should be able to get it so we can get this board out. So this is that piece here I was talking about. So you need to remove this little plastic kind of rubber covering to expose these screws. We'll be taking all those screws out. And then the next step is we're going to be removing this metal trim piece as well. So that way all of the fiberglass can drop down, that can pull away, the nose cone can pop up a little bit, we can start replacing all that wood in there. Here are the screws that came out, and you can see every one of them is rusted, which makes sense. So they were kind of tough to get out of there, but now that's out, all those screws are out, we should be able to start pulling this back. It's going to be stuck on there pretty good because you've got butyl tape underneath there, but you can very gently start peeling this back, getting that butyl tape off. And so just be really gentle. We don't want to bend this metal track because you're going to be replacing it then. So just slowly work that all the way off. Here's that trim piece off. So you can see this is all old butyl tape hanging down. And now that exposes basically this joint here. But we won't be able to get this joint completely down until we've removed these side pieces now. Similar process, we're just gonna have to take basically this trim off, this little rubber strip, get these screws out, and remove this similar to how we removed that trim piece. We've got this side off now. It was a real bugger to get off because, as you can see, all of this rust along here, they're all from the screws. So those screws had pretty much just rotted out. So every time you put your screw gun on them, they would strip. But that also means a lot of times they're not too bad, just pull down and break the heads off. So this wood underneath here is going to be replaced anyway. You can see there's some delamination there, but not anything horrible. We'll probably just be able to let that, make sure it's nice and dry, and then just glue that back together. And it gives you a good indication of where the water damage was happening. So you come over on this side, and these spots are really rusted compared to move farther back. You've got some rusted screws, but like that one's not rusted. This one wasn't rusted, but as you move forward, so likely we had a bad seal somewhere on this front half, or just water pooled towards that area. So we're gonna keep continuing to take this off. I've been able to peel back pretty much the majority of this. There's still a lot of Luan board that needs to be taken care of. And then obviously all of this needs to be replaced. So this is all 1 inch deep, 1.5 inches wide. And I may do a few things to strengthen this, but you don't want to put too much weight on it either, because then it'll start pulling down on the aluminum framing. So now I just need to start cutting new boards for all of this. And I'll replace this one as well, the majority of this, and I think I'm gonna probably have to replace most of this as well. All right, we're back inside the RV, and we're getting pretty close to being able to start reassembling some of these pieces. So what I've done here is I've got as much of the Luan board off as possible. There's still some areas I need to touch up here, but you have a really, really thin layer of almost wood right there. This is still good wood, and it's really, really difficult to get up. You can see here where I basically started accidentally going into the fiberglass, and I don't want to punch through there because then I have to seal it from the outside. So I've decided to leave this super, super thin layer of wood on here. I don't have any concerns of it not bonding to the Phylon because it is really hard to get off. And so I'm just going to leave this as it is. I'm sanding the rest that didn't come off until I get down to either the Phylon itself or good wood. So we've replaced these boards. The original boards were just basically 1.5 inch wide to match up with the aluminum, and then they sandwich the the Luan board on top, and I didn't really like that. So what I did, I cut this piece to 2.5 inches wide and then made up basically for that gap of where the Luan board sat inside, and then the Luan board now will sit on top of this basically inch tall and 2.5 inches wide, and then I can put staples in through the top instead of basically what the original design was. I think this is a much better design. And then I just replaced these. You can see they're painted white, so I painted them with the Kills-All just because it's more mold resistant for the future. And this is all garbage. This is all just kind of like paper stuff, things to be cleaned up. That's not moldy, it just needs to be pulled off and cleaned up. And then to attach these, I basically cut back to where I had good wood right there, because these actually run all the way up and I don't want to have to take apart all of this header. And so I cut back to where it was good wood, married these two, and then I'll also take a small angle steel angle bracket and attach it in there with screws just to make sure that's nice and solid. Those are attached from the front, which will tie the whole thing together. And then I may add in 1 or 2 more supports just in here to give the whole thing a little bit more structure. So I've got most of my framing done here now. There's gonna be a few things that I do, like add little L brackets just to strengthen this connection between these two and this, basically this beam I've built. I've got my new piece of Luan, which I've painted, just like the other pieces of framing. Now I'm gonna be sliding this up. It's not gonna be quite wide enough to make the entire span, but I'll just tuck it into one side, then add more Luan on the other side. And I'm gonna be just using right now just a small little stapler just to kind of hold it in place just while I have, it'll hold it in place. What's really gonna be holding it in place is all the screws that come along here. But I'll put in enough staples just to hold it up so we can glue the old Phylon up against that Luan. Here's a view from the inside after we've got the new plywood in, or the new Luan board. And you can see I missed a couple staples there, but basically from underneath I just did some 1/2 inch staples along kind of all the perimeter and the outside. I choose not to glue this. From the factory it comes glued, but I found it's just a real big pain to do that, and so I'm just going to staple it across, because ultimately the trim going all the way around these outsides is going to be holding this in place. And so I'm just going to put plenty of fasteners along here, and then the trim itself will be the mechanical connection around the outside. Here's the underneath. See the new plywood? So I did not paint this because I wanted to make sure the contact cement that I bought is going to adhere without any issues, and so I left that just natural wood. I've sanded this really well. I just need to blow it off now and make sure I get all of the dust off of there. Now I'm starting to clean up all of my seams, and I found the best tool to do this, because I've got old butyl tape on here. It's one of these plastic razor blades. Just move along there and it takes it right off. I didn't have my camera recording, but what we did was we glued this piece up to that new hardwood we put in there. It was relatively simple. I just used contact cement. I'll show you a picture of what we use. You spray it on both sides, do 2 or 3 coats. You let it sit for maybe 3 to 4 minutes until it gets really tacky. You push that up, then you use a flooring roller to roll it on, and it basically just sticks up in place. I'm looking through here and I see a lot of this. It's basically the backing for this Phylon, and it's basically cardboard, just multiple layers of paper. And I think I'm going to be replacing this too, just with actual corrugated cardboard, just making sure that it curves in this direction, because this is all kind of damp. But there's no plywood on this one. This was just paper, and it's wet a little bit ways up there. So I just took off these screws for these indicator lights, which now allows me to lift this up basically all the way to that seam that sits along top. And now I'll be able to easily replace this without pulling the entire seam off. And I'm just going to be using cardboard, because that's basically what this is. Just to kind of show, I mean, it looks like this is relatively dry. If you actually start peeling this back, and you can see that it's all wet underneath, which is why it's important to replace all of this. What I've done is I've taken this second extension ladder, basically propped it up against the front here to help hold that front panel up. You could also take that seam off all the way at the top, but I think I'm going to be able to replace everything just in this position. So I'm not planning on taking off the seam, because as soon as you get up top a little bit farther, that paper disappears. So basically transitions into roof material. So I think I'll be okay just replacing it in this fashion. After some deliberation, I've decided to go ahead and take off this top seam, just because there is some of that material that kind of goes underneath here, and we need to replace that. So I'm on the top of the roof. One sec, sweetie. Took all these screws out. I just have to gently pry up on this, remove it. Just be careful, because you've got your rubber roof membrane here that you don't want to rip, being too aggressive with this. Okay, so we got our Phylon down there now. This is all peeled up. You can see now how easy it is. See, that's all wet. So definitely a good idea that we pulled all of this off. And I'm just gonna replace this with cardboard. It's gonna be easy peasy. All I'm doing now is putting more cardboard on. I'm just picking some nice thick corrugated cardboard I have, placing it up there, and that'll essentially be the backer for the Phylon. I was actually going to use a really thin plywood, and I had some in the shop, and I started bending it. I just realized it's too brittle. It's gonna start snapping around this radius. Maybe there's better material to use, but cardboard is nice, lightweight, it is plenty strong. So I'm just gonna stick with basically how the manufacturer did it. I've got the second big piece on there. I'm not going to show this whole process, but I did bend this bottom quite a bit before I put it on, just to make sure it'll make that radius without giving me like sharp creases or anything like that. But I need to get to the top, finish up the top here, go down this middle, put a couple staples in the bottom, and then put that Phylon right back on. This is likely the most redneck thing I've ever done, but I feel like this is exactly how the manufacturer had it from the factory. In fact, I think this is going to be a little bit stronger, because cardboard, since it's corrugated, has a lot of strength on the horizontal plane, whereas the stuff they use from the factory is literally just paper. There's just a bunch of paper kind of mashed together, and there was no strength to it. I found a patch that was really dry. I pulled it apart, and there was no strength. It was just flexible. So I think this is actually going to be a little bit stronger. Now we're just going to be putting that front cap back on. I'm just going to get on the roof, set it down there, put a couple screws in just to hold it in place while I set it down. I'm up on a time crunch here because we got some rain coming, so I'm trying to do this. I apologize for not filming a lot, but I've got this side mostly on now. I'm using the product Seal Tight. I believe it's made by Dicor. So this basically goes over the seam first before you put this on. I still have butyl tape on here, of course, so it kind of creates a double seal. This stuff comes in a roll like this with a backing. You just need to remove that backing. It's kind of tough to get that backing off, but then as you come down here, you pinch your seams together. You put that down all the way on the bottom. There's not much else to it. So here's what that Seal Tight tape looks like. They say it's pressure activated, so once you get on there, make sure you rub it on really well. Put a lot of downward force on that. That should actually seal the entire seam itself. The butyl tape that we put on the trim is just kind of the extra seal. Here's our new butyl tape. This stuff's pretty easy to work with. It comes with this little backing. So basically you want to keep this backing on. And here's our old trim piece. We're going to be putting it on both sides. The focus is going to be this side with the screws on it, because we want to make sure butyl tape covers those screw holes so we don't get water going into the trailer. So we're going to be placing it along this edge here first, then coming back and put it on the side here as well. This is the bottom seam piece. It goes underneath there and holds that up. And there is a smaller lip and a longer lip, and that just makes up for the overlapping in Phylon. So make sure you get those in the right spot. We're going to put butyl tape on here and put that back together. And I apologize for not filming this, but I'm on top of the roof. We had torrential rain coming in, so I had to hurry and get the seal on. It's really nothing different than what we've done with the rest of the seals. We just got our butyl tape on there and put underneath there, screwed it in. Just hold that Phylon down while you basically clamp that with the screws. And as a double seal, now I'm doing a Teardown over the entire top here. A Teardown is something that needs to go onto a clean surface, so I've cleaned the roof as well as the Phylon really well. And it also really helps to have something to roll it on with, because it's somewhat pressure activated. Once it's on, really difficult to get off, so make sure you do it right the first time. And I'm just going to be applying that. I won't be able to show this on film, but basically you just take that backing off, lay it down, similar to how you put on the seal tight corner, what we did on the rest of these seams. Okay, so there's the Teardown on. Got a little bit dirty right here because as you work this stuff, some of that kind of butyl tape stuff gets on your hands and you lay it down. I'm still going to go in here, put the self-leveling die-core product on that to make sure it doesn't go underneath basically where the Teardown stopped. But other than that, this should be pretty close to being a wrap.